Linda Hirsch, and this is EdCast, a program created and produced by educators for everyone interested in education. With some of the worst effects of the COVID-19 pandemic under control, we are seeing a slow return to our pre-COVID lives, and that includes how educators teach and students learn. 2022 saw the return to the classroom and efforts to provide a less chaotic school experience for students. How successful were we? Today, education policy expert David Bloomfield joins me for a look back at the education successes and failures of 2022 and what lies ahead in the coming year. Now on EdCast. Joining me today is David Bloomfield, Professor of Education Leadership, Law, and Policy at Brooklyn College and the CUNY Graduate Center. He is the author of American Public Education Law, among other published works, and is a frequent commentator on city, state, and national education issues. Thank you so much for joining us today on EdCast, and let me wish you a Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Nice to be back.
Thank you. The last time we met was in January 2022. And then we looked back at a year in education that was so totally dominated by COVID, and we were looking forward to people being vaccinated, and there was a new administration, but you didn't feel we had done a very good job educating students in that previous year. So did we do a better job educating students in 2022 than we did in 2021?
Well, anything would have to be better, so let's just say it's better.
Okay.
But certainly everything we talk about today is under the weight and the breadth of COVID. And so we have to understand that it's going to be a long way up back to normalcy. And
Right.
It's not normal yet, particularly the level of chronic absenteeism. So we don't even have the kids in the schools necessarily to do the kind of education that we need.
Were there any real successes that you can point to that you felt really good about this year?
I feel really good about the movement toward more phonics instruction. We were talking before the broadcast that we're already worried that some educators, at least, are worried that the pendulum is swinging too far toward phonics only and not bringing content and context to the table. But let's let the pendulum swing a bit before we get worried. And so I think that as the kind of, de Blasio had pre-K as his issue, reading instruction it seems to be, and appropriately, Adams' issue.
Now let's talk about Adams for a minute, because one of the things we had sort of looked forward to was a new administration. And although you were concerned that Adams might follow in the de Blasio mold and be too much involved in education and not leave it to his chancellor to really do the work. I know it's early on, sort of, but what's your take over this past year on how Adams is operating compared to de Blasio?
Well, Adams, like de Blasio, is a politician. And one of the downsides of mayoral control is that education is even more politicized than it was back in the old pre-mayoral control days. And so, to a great extent, the major policy moves, like reading, seem to be coming out of City Hall, not out of the Tweed Courthouse, where the Department of Education is located. But on the other hand, he has a very close relationship with the Chancellor, David Banks. They've known each other for decades. And Banks seems to be taking control of the system, for better or for worse. It's important to recognize that David Banks was never a superintendent before. Very unusual to have a big city school superintendent or chancellor who doesn't have that kind of experience. He comes out of the principalship. He comes out of running in the last number of years a semi-autonomous district, really, a group of schools, a network of the Eagle Academy. So let's give him a chance. I think there's been some hits and some misses along the way, and primarily the difficulty of transitioning to running a big city school system.
I know you had mentioned last year that you weren't sure he'd be up for the job with that limited background, but he seems to be showing some good signs of growing into it, if nothing else, maybe.
Well,
let's see. Let's see.
The grade is incomplete, but let's see.
We'll see. Let's go back to pre-K that you mentioned. Pre-K was kind of the jewel in de Blasio's crown, and he made a big thing about it, and he always would point to it as his big education accomplishment. And there had been hope that it would go down to the 2-year-olds, and yet there's been some news about the pre-K system not being in such great shape. What's your take on what's been happening with pre-K right now?
Well, that seems to be an Adams and Banks miss.
Okay.
There's a degree of disarray going on in the early childhood office at the Central Department of Education. He has cut back on the goals of enrolling every child who wants it in pre-K. 3K, we call it, the 3-year-old program. The one bright spot there is that he seems to want to increase the number of slots for children with IEPs. These are special education students. So probably more miss than hit, but the special education piece is a big improvement. Cutting back on that is a big problem. We need kids in preschool education, particularly kids who need that head start in terms of socialization, not necessarily academics. Let's make sure that we keep our eye on developmental approaches to pre-K and not sell it as a route to a gifted program. Another issue that I think has been a Adams and Banks miss, even though they're delivering on what they said they would do, which was to expand on gifted and talented.
I want to take a step back. You bring up so many things. You're absolutely right about the socialization of the younger child, because what we're seeing as a result of COVID is our kindergarten kids are coming into the first grade really missing a lot of the developmental socialization skills they would have gotten if they had been face-to-face in a classroom. And I agree with you wholeheartedly that the job of a pre-K and even a kindergarten program, which has gotten so academic these days, it's not like kindergarten I went to, has really stopped the focus on, or not totally, but the idea of playing and the idea of socializing young children. So I agree with you totally. And now there has been in today's Times, there's an article, and you've already seen it, about mismanagement in the pre-K programs. Do you think that is something we should be concerned about? A lot of people are leaving the programs. They are complaining about the new supervisor. Do you think that's a worrisome sign, or do you agree that it's just growing pains?
I think we have to be worried about management overall.
Okay.
This administration, as I said, being new in some ways to the large size, we are over twice the size of Los Angeles, the second largest system in the country, and they've just done a lousy job acclimatizing themselves to managing the system. I think that the early childhood program will right itself at some point. But there's been a degree of dissension and disorganization. There's been a degree of dissension and disorganization in eliminating field offices, and those, not necessarily those positions, but who those people report to. There's been issues in staffing up the PEP. The PEP is the Panel for Education Policy, which is our word for the Board of Education. And there's been a degree of problems about who Adams is appointing to that board, and a real loss at the legislature, where he lost a degree of control over his appointments because the legislature was not pleased with the way de Blasio handled the PEP, making it into just a part of the administration rather than a check and balance.
I want to go back to PEP. You helped me so much with the segues today. As you said, it stands for the Panel for Education Policy. I don't know that our viewers know that much about what it does. So can you tell us a little bit about who is on that panel, what it's supposed to do? It has been mostly a rubber stamp, but this past year, there was a little bit of protest coming from PEP. Tell us what PEP is, and if you see it as something useful, and why.
Well, the PEP is the Board of Education. Right. In most school districts in the country, the Board of Education is elected by the people to represent their views, and they hire a professional educator, the superintendent, to do the day-to-day work. Right. Our PEP is appointed by the mayor And the chancellor is appointed by the mayor as well. So there's always been a problem with the PEP just being, as they say, less than a rubber stamp, because a rubber stamp makes an impression, and the PEP has just gone along. What the legislature would like to see is greater independence on the PEP, and that's obviously a problem for banks and a problem for Adams if they just want to push through their policies.
One of the things you mentioned was the gifted and talented programs that I know you have real issues with, and you are right that Adams has said he's all for them. But to me, this comes under a bigger umbrella of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I know that you've been concerned, as have many other people, that our school system is very segregated, and everybody talks about making that better. But have we gone in any direction to make the New York City school system a more integrated system?
Yes, we have gone in a direction, and that direction is down.
Okay. So what's been happening? That makes
at least de Blasio paid some lip service to diversity. And right now, there's a lack of leadership at Central. Banks says that he's going to leave diversification efforts down to the district level. And the districts have shown, with some notable exceptions, like District 15 and District 3, District 15 in Brownstone, Brooklyn, District 3 in Manhattan on the basically west side and upper west side. You can't do that on a district by district basis because the districts themselves are highly segregated in most cases. And we have a curriculum that's being developed, so let's give some applause to diversifying the curriculum, but there hasn't been sufficient attention and, in fact, a downward view of diversification of enrollment. The gifted and talented programs are notoriously weighted toward white and Asian students and against black and brown students. We really have to make clear efforts in that direction, and that hasn't been coming from the administration.
I also think, I know we've done a show on gifted and talented programs and the specialized high schools, that we are probably one of the few gifted and talented programs in the country that starts so early, that most of these programs don't start till third grade. And they don't even look at giftedness in kindergarten, first and second. They really start later on. I mean, people from Chicago on the program. And what a major criticism of our system, of course, is that why are you testing children who are 4 years old and 5 years old and looking for giftedness?
One good thing that they've done is actually eliminate the test for entry into pre-kindergarten and kindergarten gifted and talented programs. So now it's based on teacher interviews. But of course, teacher interviews are notoriously subject to bias.
Yes, I think that's a problem.
And so there's a problem with entry. And those kids, they get locked in. So it doesn't take a long view toward developmental progress. The other thing is they're highly segregated. Our specialized high schools, and I not only Bronx Science and Bronx
Brooklyn
Science,
Tech,
Brooklyn Tech, and Stuyvesant, they're almost all separate schools. And why do we segregate in separate schools? Maybe we could have programs in different schools so that kids can be having lunch together, having other subject areas together. So the way we go about our gifted and talented program is so myopic and discriminatory.
Well, we'll be looking more at any changes. I know we've had people on to talk about the specialized high schools and changes they want to make, but it's a big topic. So we're going to have to see what happens there. And hopefully you can come back and we can talk about that some more because it's certainly been ongoing. The conversation's been ongoing for many years. I do want to say that it reminds me, however, when you talked about the curriculum being developed, the issues that we have in changing our curriculum to be more inclusive, to talk about history, to talk about things happening like the 1619 Project, the backlash against teaching things in our classrooms, not so much in New York City, but you know, we did a show on gender identity, and I got some of the worst responses, the ugliest male responses I've ever gotten on this program, just to speak about gender and sexual identity in the classroom. So I think curriculum change is also going to be hard won if we want to teach the kinds of things that we think our students should know about. I was really taken aback. So I have to say that there's work to be done, and it would be wonderful to see some real changes. I know the American History Project has been working with our schools. We're trying to change curriculum, but that's going to be hard. I mean, not impossible, but we'll see. COVID. So it's not gone. Still with us. I, Linda Hirsch, am still somewhat worried about COVID, I'll say so. But we are noticing that two of the major impacts that happened for our students, of course, was learning loss and mental health issues. And let me start with mental health then. There is a big mental health crisis going on right now. What do you think? Do you think our schools are addressing that? And maybe what should we be looking at? Because we are seeing a real uptick in students who are showing up with mental health issues.
The schools aren't funded sufficiently to address this problem. You asked about, Adams running the schools. Well, Adams controls the school budget, and as we saw in the fall, the mayor's budget cut back on the kind of funding for social workers and counselors that we really need in the schools. And so let's hope that the mayor sees the light. I'm not sure that he can. We're in a tight budget situation, but we need to be able to provide the kind of professional supports that children need. There are issues of behavior. There are issues of drug use. Chalkbeat just had a very good article about undetected drug use by students, which is expanding because of edibles and access.
Marijuana use, yes.
And so that's a very big issue, and students aren't going to be able to learn if they're high in school.
No, and although they might enjoy it more, but there is certainly a problem also with depression and trauma and anxiety, and I don't know that I wanted to ask you, do you know anything about the state of our community schools, the schools which were supposed to be which were supposed to house under one umbrella a variety of services?
It's interesting. There hasn't been a lot of new focus on community schools. They're very expensive, so it would be a good thing to be able to expand that program. Certainly there needs to be attention, and it's not clear to me that there has been that attention. Let's hope there is. But again, it's a budget issue, and we have to make sure that the mayor is spending interagency funds for medical care as well as mental health care.
Now, our recent test scores showed a learning loss. Now, there is still a lot of back and forth about how severe the learning loss is, depending on the study that you look at. It's terrible, it's not so terrible. But there has been a drop in math and reading scores in New York City, certainly. What do you think of that? And nationwide, do you think we'll be able to make that up, and what will it take to?
So I think we ought to call it interrupted learning instead of learning loss.
Okay,
fine. And so I think that that's an issue. It's an issue particularly for the early grades, for those kids who are being introduced to reading and math skills. The math scores were much worse than the reading scores. It seems if you learn to read in the early grades, then you can progress pretty much on your own in terms of reading. But you can't progress if you haven't in geometry, if you haven't had geometry. And so there really has to be, I think, not only attention to reading in this administration, but to math skills too.
As we know, the further on you go, as you mentioned, the higher the grades, even in fourth grade, when you begin to use reading to learn instead of learning to read in the earlier grades, that's when we've always seen a drop off. And now I hope we can get our students back on track, because we'll see. Online learning, I know last year when we talked about online learning, to me it's certainly been the winner of the pandemic, because I see it in higher ed certainly everywhere now. AA online degrees, our students really don't want to come back so much on campus, but for the lower grades, you said that we would be entering an age of interdisciplinary learning and intermodal learning. What do you see perhaps happening with our technological environment in terms of education?
Well, we're certainly going to be seeing more in-school technology. Yeah. And that's what I support.
And that could be good.
Let's have the kids in school, and we're already doing that kind of hybrid learning in school. It doesn't seem that remote learning as its own type of schooling has taken hold. And because I think
Hasn't been that effective.
because it hasn't been effective.
But students like it.
And we still have particular issues in terms of low-income families without Wi-Fi, difficult home situations that are less stable than people who have enough money to afford a separate room for the remote learning or whatever. But so I think we're moving into a situation with more technology in school, and unfortunately, snow days seem to be a thing of the past.
I was horrified.
But except for that,
But there's no snow anyway, so what's the difference?
Well, there's no snow, and I think there's also no remote learning on snow days anyway. So that remains to be seen. But remote learning at home seems to be no question of that it's increased, but it doesn't seem to have gone as mainstream as we thought.
Yeah, it's a little different in the higher ed area, but we're running out of time. And so I want to get to just one or two more points that I know you have something to say about. We are facing a teacher shortage. And I think we really have to recognize that our teachers have gone through a lot during the pandemic. We did a show with some people from the Grad Center who spoke about what it was like to teach during times of trauma, not just the pandemic, but floods and shootings. And, you know, our teachers have really gone through a lot. COVID is not the only reason why they're leaving, if you look at surveys, but they are leaving and they are not entering the profession. What do you think we could do to get people to enter the profession and to stay in the profession?
Well, I think that we have to increase, salaries and compensation otherwise. This whole question right now about retiree health benefits makes it seem even more unstable in terms of a lifetime career. But we also have to make sure that we have enough order in the schools so that teachers can get down to teaching and not be mere disciplinarians.
So with a minute left, if we had to pick 3 priorities for the coming year for 2023, if you were advising the mayor, what would you say should be his top 3 priorities in education for this year?
As always, really, it's kids with special needs. It's our large number of English language learners, and the necessity to fund our schools adequately. Let me add a 4th, because we talked about it already, which is equity. And equity has not really been on this mayor's radar screen, it seems to me, and that's across the board. That's affordable housing, and it's in our schools.
I want to thank you again so much, David Bloomfield, for your ever insightful and informative comments. I look so forward to seeing you, and let's say that in 2023 we should meet again, and not just at the end of the year, okay? Because you always have so much to lend to the conversation.
Always available. Thank you.
So thank you so much, David Bloomfield. Don't go away. We'll be right back with our Ed Bites. That was terrific. Welcome back to this edition of Ed Bites. Do you feel that since the pandemic, you just don't know how to talk to people anymore? According to research cited by National Public Radio, the pandemic has changed personalities, and people are not as good at social interactions. They are also less creative, not as responsible, and trust others less. The experts don't know if these personality changes are temporary or permanent, and they are seen more often in young adults. There has been much discussion in education circles about the best time to start the school day. Education Week reports that while beginning the school day later benefited middle and high school students, it didn't do much for elementary school children. A study by the American Educational Research Association found a near zero effect for these learners. If you live with a young, energetic, early riser, this won't come as a surprise. The recent news about the national drop in math and reading scores for 4th and 8th graders was disheartening. But older learners are not faring well either. Major news outlets report that the recent ACT composite scores used for college admissions were at a 30-year low. 42% of test takers failed to meet subject targets for English, math, science, and reading, up from 38% in 2021. The debates and pushback surrounding teaching subjects like gender, race, and sexuality are resulting in teachers avoiding controversial topics. Education Week reports that teachers are afraid of backlash and even legal consequences. Some said that their supervisors warned them to stay away from these topics. While some parents believe these issues don't belong in the classroom, other educators and parents feel many children will be negatively affected by the avoidance of these conversations. Thank you for joining us for a new season of EdCast. We look forward to seeing you next time.
We'd like to hear from you. Please send your thoughts and comments to CUNYEdcast@gmail.com.